October 1958. Abilene, Texas. A pawn shop on North First Street, 11 blocks from the Paramount Theater and 4 blocks from the Greyhound bus depot. A blind man is sitting on the sidewalk outside it with a piece of cardboard in his hands that he cannot see. The sign says, "I earned this medal. Please help me buy it back." The medal is a silver star. It sits in the window of the shop, pinned to a square of black velvet beside a pocket watch with a cracked crystal and a Browning pistol that someone had left in the spring and never returned for. The pawn shop owner wants $4 for it. Harold Brister has 37 cents. He has been on that sidewalk for 6 days. Here is the story. Harold Brister was 61 years old in October of 1958 and had not been able to see since the morning of September 17, 1944. A Japanese Type 99 grenade landed in the communication trench where he was stringing signal wire on the island of Peleliu. And when the smoke cleared, Corporal Eddie Mace and Private First Class Roy Clune were gone, and Harold was not, which he considered the only unfair part of that morning. He never said otherwise to anyone. He said, when people asked, which was rarely, that at least he had come back with his hands. He went home to Abilene because it was where he was from, and because a blind man in a strange city is a man without a map. His sister Edna and her husband Raymond gave him the back room of the house on Ambler Avenue, and Harold paid $8 a week from his disability check for 9 years without missing a single week and without being asked twice. Raymond built him a workbench against the back wall under the window that faced south, the one that let in morning warmth across his wrists while he worked. And Harold repaired radios on that bench every weekday from 6 until noon, working by touch and by the particular sounds each circuit made when something inside it was failing. The smell in that room was solder and old capacitor wax and coffee that had been burning since before dawn. The feeling of small screws turning under his fingertips, the way a man does something he has done enough times that the doing of it is the statement. Some of you know that kind of work, the kind that asks your hands more than your eyes. Some of you have known a man who could do more in the dark than most people could do looking straight at it. He kept the medals in a shoebox on the shelf above the workbench. The Silver Star, the Purple Heart, the Pacific Campaign Ribbon, and the Presidential Unit Citation the 1st Marine Division received for Guadalcanal, which Harold had missed by 2 years, but carried anyway, because the division was the unit, and the unit was the honor. And that was that. He had never shown the medals to anyone. He put his thumb to each one sometimes before work, running the point of the star and finding the name on the back with his thumbnail the way a man reads the only word that matters. He did not consider that sentimental. He considered it accurate. The summer of 1958 was when the chest infection settled in and would not move. The doctor on South Treadaway charged $12 for the visit. The medication was $6.40 at the pharmacy on Cypress Street. Harold's disability check was $44 a month. The radio repair work had dried up over the previous 2 years as television sets moved into the houses on Ambler Avenue and the surrounding streets, and people stopped bringing him their AM receivers the way they once had. He owed Raymond 3 weeks of back rent. He owed the pharmacy for the last prescription. He took the shoebox down from the shelf. He held each medal in his palm for a moment, not long, and put the Purple Heart and the campaign ribbon back. He put the Silver Star in his shirt pocket and walked the 11 blocks to the pawn shop on North First Street. He counted his steps because he did not have his cane that morning, and the pavement on this route was cracked in 3 places he had learned to account for. The walk took him 40 minutes. The man behind the counter gave him $7 for the Silver Star. Harold said nothing to the amount. He took the $7 and walked back and paid the pharmacy and put 3 weeks of rent in Raymond's hand and bought a tin of coffee because he knew from the sound of the canister when he lifted it that Edna's was nearly gone. The silver star went into the window for $4. The shop owner had paid $7 and priced it at $4 because there was no market for military decorations in Abilene in 1958, and he wanted it moved and out of his case. He had not turned it over to read the name on the back. Harold came back 4 days later with $2 he had earned on a repair job and asked for it. The man said $4. Harold said he had $2 now and the rest by the end of the week. The man said the price was the price and that he was not a bank. Harold said he understood and asked if he could hold it for just a moment before he left, and the man said no, because it was in the case and in the window, and that was where merchandise stayed until it was sold. Harold sat down on the sidewalk outside. He sent word with the neighbor's boy to have the sign made. He told the boy exactly what to write, and the boy wrote it without question and brought it back folded once. Harold held it in both hands and felt the edge of the cardboard and the raised texture, where the felt marker had gone thick, and he knew it said what he had asked for. He sat in front of the pawn shop every morning, from 8 until noon, with the sign flat across his knees and 37 cents in his coat pocket. Everybody on North First Street knew what was happening by the second morning. The woman who ran the dry cleaner 2 doors down brought him coffee in a paper cup on the third morning. Without asking, the pharmacist across the street stood in his doorway and watched. A hardware man walked past Harold twice a day for 6 days in a row, read the sign, looked at the window, and went back to his business both times. A woman with a grocery bag stopped on the 4th morning, stood still for several seconds, and then kept walking because she was already going to be late for something else. There were a dozen people who could have made the arithmetic simple. None of them did. Nobody wanted to be the one who solved a problem that had been created by someone else, and that anyone could see was wrong, and that everyone was waiting for the right someone to fix. You know the feeling. The moment when the right thing is plain to everyone in the room, and the room decides to be somewhere else. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. John Wayne was in Abilene because he had not planned to be. He had driven from Fort Worth through the night heading west toward a meeting about a property in New Mexico that would never come to anything, and his truck had needed oil at a station off Highway 80 before dawn, and by the time the sun was up, he was already inside the city's morning traffic, moving at the pace of a man who had given up on a schedule. He had eaten breakfast at a diner on Butternut Street, eggs and black coffee at a red vinyl counter stool, and was walking back to where he had parked when he turned north instead of south on North First Street, for no reason he could have named afterward to anyone who asked. He saw Harold from 100 feet away. A large man on a sidewalk with a piece of cardboard across his knees. Wayne stopped at the corner. He stood there long enough to read the sign and understand what he was looking at. Then he walked toward the pawn shop and went past Harold without stopping, and opened the door and went in. The shop smelled of machine oil and old leather and the flat mineral smell of metal objects that have sat in glass cases for a long time without being touched. The fluorescent light above the back shelves flickered once and steadied. A ceiling fan made a small catch on every third rotation, the same note repeating. The man behind the counter was writing on an invoice pad with a short pencil. He looked up. Wayne said, "The silver star in the window." The man said, $4. Wayne said, "Turn it over and read me the name on the back." The man looked at him the way a man looks at a customer who has stopped being interested in commerce. He went to the window and lifted the metal from the velvet square and turned it over and read, Harold Brister. Wayne said, "He's outside." The man was quiet. Wayne said, "I need to know what's a fair price for the whole shop, not the star. Every item in the cases and on the shelves. What you paid in total." The man said he was not selling the shop. Wayne said, "The inventory. The cost of what is in this room right now. Add it up." The man looked at him for a moment. He put down the pencil and did the arithmetic on the back of the invoice sheet and named a number. Wayne looked at him without expression for 3 full seconds. Then, he said, "Write me a receipt." $460. He paid it from a money clip he kept in his shirt pocket, counted it onto the counter in a businesslike way that did not invite conversation. He did not argue the number. He asked for the silver star first, before the receipt was complete, and he walked outside and crouched down in front of Harold Brister and held the medal out at the level where Harold's hands were resting on his knees. He said, "This belongs to you. I had it on loan for about 4 minutes." Harold took it in both hands. He ran his right thumb across the face of the star, and then turned it and found his name on the back with his thumbnail, and pressed down on the letters. He was quiet. His face did not change the way faces change when emotion arrives suddenly. It changed in a smaller, more private way, the set of his jaw shifting by a degree or two. The way a load settles when it is redistributed correctly. He said, "What do I owe you?" Wayne said, "Not a thing. I owe you." He helped Harold to his feet. He walked him back inside and told the man behind the counter that Harold was to take anything he wanted from the shop and leave with it. Harold said he did not need anything. Wayne said he believed him. He said to run his hands over the shelves anyway and take something for his sister. Harold walked along the second shelf on the south wall and put his hand on a Zenith table radio with a cracked bakelite case. He could tell from the weight and the size of the dial what it was and what was wrong with it. He said he could fix it. He held it under his arm. Wayne walked him back to Ambler Avenue. All 11 blocks. He did not leave him at the corner. He walked him to the door and waited until Harold was inside. He did not introduce himself. Harold had understood who it was by the 3rd intersection, when he heard a woman across the street stop walking entirely and then begin walking fast in the other direction, because she did not know what to do with what she was seeing. Harold never asked, and Wayne never said. That is most of how this ever got out at all. Wayne contacted the Veterans Service Organization in Abilene the following week and arranged for the remaining inventory of the pawn shop to be delivered to their offices on Chestnut Street. He told the coordinator, a retired Army administrative sergeant named Celia Reyes, who had been running the office on a volunteer salary for 6 years, and who kept the files in a system nobody but her could navigate, to trace the owners of whatever could be traced, and to destroy the records of his involvement once the work was done. Celia Reyes spent 3 months on phone calls. She found 11 veterans or their surviving next of kin across the country who were owed something from the cases of that shop on North First Street. 3 families were in Texas. 2 were in New Mexico. 1 was in Louisiana. 1 was in Ohio. The rest were spread the way men spread after a war, in towns nobody else had reason to visit, living the lives that follow long service and a bus ticket home. She contacted Wayne's production office once in the first week to confirm the scope of what he was authorizing. He wrote back 1 line on a sheet of plain white paper: "Do what's right." $460 in October of 1958. That is roughly $5,000 in the money of today. Divided across 11 men, it is $450 per family on average, which does not sound like much until you understand what a man is holding when he puts his thumb to his own name on the back of a silver star that was in a pawnshop window 4 days ago. Then, it sounds like everything. Harold repaired the Zenith radio within a week and put it on the shelf by the south window. It played from 1958 until 1991. That is 33 years of a radio a man carried home under his arm on the best afternoon of his decade. Harold kept repairing sets on Ambler Avenue for 11 more years after that October, and in that time he trained 2 young men from the neighborhood who wanted to learn how circuits worked. One of them went on to open an electronics shop on South Clack Street in 1969 and ran it for 22 years before handing it to his son. 22 years of a business that began at a workbench that smelled of solder and old wax, in a back room where a blind man had been sitting on a sidewalk with 37 cents 11 years before. That is what $460 compounds into when it lands in the right place. Not just the 11 families and the medals returned, not just the Zenith radio that played for 33 years, a shop on South Clack Street, a son who took the keys in 1991, work for 22 years for the people that shop employed. The Zenith radio is still on the shelf in the back room on Ambler Avenue. Edna's daughter took the house in 1974. Her daughter took it in 1999. Nobody has moved the radio because nobody who lived there thought it was the right thing to do. The case is still cracked. The dial still turns. It has not been plugged in since the last time Harold plugged it in, and nobody knows what day that was. Only that the radio was there when they arrived and will be there when they leave. The morning light still comes through that south window and lies across the shelf for a while every day. Then it moves on. If you are ever in Abilene, the house on Ambler Avenue is still standing. The elm tree Harold navigated by, the one whose leaves he could hear from the front step in the wind, came down in a storm in 1986. But the house is there. And the radio is on that shelf. Some of you already know the name of someone who did something like this quietly, for someone who needed it and never said a word to anyone afterward. This story belongs to them too. John Wayne never told anyone about the morning on North First Street. Not to any reporter, not in any of the interviews that came in the years that followed, not in any letter that has ever been found. Celia Reyes gave one account of it to a small Abilene paper in 1983, 25 years after it happened, because she felt someone should. It ran once and was not picked up by anyone. He was not the kind of man who arranged for people to pick things up. What a man carries out of this world is not always what he was known for. Sometimes it is the morning he turned north instead of south on a street he had no reason to be on, and stopped, and read a cardboard sign held by a man who could not read it himself, and understood what he was looking at, and walked into a shop with money in his shirt pocket, and walked out with nothing except the knowledge that a silver star was back where it belonged. He did not need that walk home to be anything more than 11 blocks. He did not need anyone on those 11 blocks to understand what had just happened. He was not interested in anyone knowing what had just happened. If this is a story worth keeping, subscribe. There are more of them, and every one of them deserves to be told. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John Wayne anymore.